Welcome to the Gita in Action podcast. I'm your host, Radha Priti, and I'm here with a group of seekers. We are reading through the Bhagavad Gita. We've been at it now for almost 3 months, close to 3 months. We're getting there. And we are in chapter 2. Chapter 2, text 38 is where we are. And what we talked about Thursday is the material reasons. Krishna is now talking to Arjuna. Krishna's now kind of instructing Arjuna. We saw early in the first chapter that Arjuna surrendered to Krishna and told him that he was bewildered and confused and that he wanted to be his disciple and to instruct him. And so Krishna started to instruct him, and he started with the knowledge of the soul. We went through all of that. And then in the last section, text 31 through 37, Krishna talked about the material reasons why Arjuna should fight. So how these material reasons would bring about auspiciousness. So now we're moving on. Now we're going to start this new section. And this is chapter 2, text 238. So I'll share my screen and we'll get right into it. So 238 says, "Do thou fight for the sake of fighting, without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by doing so, you should never incur sin." So this is kind of interesting because in the last verse, text 37, there was that kind of profit loss calculation. And the conclusion was to fight. Krishna said, if you fight and you win, you get the kingdom. If you fight and you lose, you get heavenly planets. So there's no real losing here. And now he's saying, do thou fight for thy sake of fighting without considering happiness or distress. So now he's saying, give up the profit loss calculation to be free from sin. So it seems like an apparent contradiction. But what Krishna is actually doing here is he's talking about how one can think of something bigger than material gain. So it's not a contradiction, but rather like an expansion of consciousness here. Because in the material world, we have earth, we know earth, we have hell, and we have heaven. That's the material world. And this is all temporary. But above all of that is the eternal spiritual world. This is like the Vedic cosmology. And the bigger thing is elevation to the spiritual plane of reality, going to higher existence, which is eternal. So in the verses 31 through 37, Krishna is explaining the benefits to Arjuna in earth and in heaven. But now he's taking it one step further, and he's explaining the benefits for the spiritual world, and therefore expanding the vision here. So he's talking about rewards beyond heaven. It's like if you have a current house that you live in and it's rented, but then you move, and that would be like earth, right? And then because it's temporary, it's a rented house. And then you move to a bigger, nicer, more luxurious, but still rented house. That's like heaven, right? But now the analogy would be going to like an owned house, buying a house, a nice that has everything, and you own it. That's like the spiritual world. So it's not that, going from a rented house, a small rented house, to a bigger rented house isn't an upgrade, because it absolutely is. But it's not the highest, which would be, owning your house. So that's kind of how Krishna is going through this logic here for Arjuna. So we'll go to text 239 next. And he says, "Thus far, I have described this knowledge to you through analytical study. Now listen as I explain it in terms of working without fruitive results. O son of Prita, when you act in such knowledge, you can free yourself from the bondage of works." This is a key transition point, because 37 verses 38 seems contradictory, but they're not. We just talked through that. This is now explained further in this verse. So there's this term called Sankhya philosophy, and that's what he's referring to as this analytical study. And all that means, it's an analytical description of the body and the soul. And that's what Krishna talked about in the beginning, 211 through 230. He says, and in this 239, he says, thus far I've described this knowledge to you through analytical study. That's what he's talking about. He told Juna about the difference between the body and the soul and the relationship between the two. So now he's going to move to, how do we apply it? How do we apply this knowledge? And there's this term that it's called buddhi yoga that comes in. And this is really working for the satisfaction of God. So like working selflessly. So you take your material motives out of it, and you're really detached, and you're really just working for the satisfaction of God. And this is what leads to freedom from karmic bondage. So if we talk about this Vedic cosmology, we have earth, hell, heaven. We all know that for every action, there's a reaction. You know, if we treat somebody poorly, it's going to come back to us. And in this Gita philosophy, this Gita worldview, our next moments are determined by that karma, right? That's like a part of the equation that determines, you know, either what happens to us in this life or what happens to us in the next life. So if we do enough really positive things, we have a lot of good karma, then we'll be elevated to a heavenly planet in the next life. If we don't, maybe we'll get a lower body, like an animal body, or we'll go to a hellish planet. And that's kind of the way that karma works in this material universe. But what's happening here is Krishna saying, if you detach from your work, if you're not concerned about accumulating positive karma and getting benefited from that in this life or the next, and you just dedicate it all to me, you will get freedom from this system. Like you'll break out of this system, and these laws will no longer govern you because you won't be a part of the system anymore, and you'll be elevated to the spiritual world, which is the highest, which is like the owned house. So now he's just giving higher knowledge. Before, we were talking about Arjuna's material well-being. Like if he fights, he gets prosperity here. If he fights and loses, he gets the pros of heaven. Now Krishna is introducing this higher purpose, this freedom from karmic bondage. Because again, we live in this material universe, which is governed by certain laws. Some of them we're very familiar with. We see like just the way that our universe functions, that we become used to, like gravity, or you know, there's all these principles that govern our material universe. One of them we know is karma. That does not exist in the spiritual world. So that's what he's saying. To break free from this cycle of birth and death and this karmic wheel, to break out of that, we have to dedicate our actions to God. So that's called buddhi yoga, acting with intelligence. Intelligence being knowledge of the soul and the body, and not being driven by the senses, being driven by that higher purpose, that intelligence. And this is the application for decision making. And that's kind of the progression that Krishna's taking us through here. Arjuna surrendered to him. Then Krishna explained the knowledge of the body and the soul, the relationship between the two. Then Krishna met the audience where they're at and explained the material long-term benefits. Like, hey, even if you do this, you're gonna have great benefits in earth or in heaven. Now he's again broadening the vision, taking it up here, saying, better than that, better than this temporary rented house is the spiritual world. And to get there, we practice what's called buddhi yoga. So there's a couple other terms that I want to introduce that are going to be used in this chapter. One of them is called karma kanda. And karma kanda is basically just having that kind of transactional relationship with God. Like you pray for, you know, a good job and a good relationship, and then you get that. It's kind of like Amazon Prime with God. Like you just click the order, and then you want that, and then that's fulfilled. And in the Vedas, there's all kinds of like sacrifices and like prescriptions for how to obtain these different things. And it's basically people that pursue this are kind of like religious materialists. You know, they say, this is what I want in this life. And then they refer to the Vedas. Okay, this is how I'm going to get it, by performing this sacrifice, by doing this duty, by this. But their motivation is really seeped. I love Amazon, right? Well, this is what it was. The Vedas, the Karma Kandas, it was like a religious Amazon Prime. You know, tell me, I'll just do this, I'll trade it in, and then I'll get this benefit. But what was happening here, what happens here is that people decide what's going to be best for them in their life, what they want in their life, and then they ask God for it, and then they cash in. And it's called karma kanda. And it's you know, a lot of people are at that stage, or at that step in their relationship with God, you know, where they still want to be the controller. They think they know. And they're interested in the welfare in this life and the next. That's like pretty much the scope of their vantage point, is just their happiness in this life and the next. You know, kind of like a child doesn't have vantage point to know that like getting good grades is good now, because it'll benefit them in the future, right? Because their scope is so limited. That's kind of like what this karma kanda would be. Like they just have a limited scope of what real life is and happiness. And therefore they're making decisions based on that limited scope. So that's the relationship. Karma kanda is like this transactional relationship with God. This was covered in 231 through 237. So when we talk about this material short-term benefit, that's what it is. It's karma kanda. It's this transactional relationship with God, saying, okay, well, if you fight and you win, you get to go to heaven. Or no, you get to enjoy things here. If you fight and you lose, you get to go to heaven. That kind of logic would appear, or would appeal to a karma kanda. So now this section that we're coming into talks about spiritual welfare. This is what's going to be covered in the next verses, the spiritual long-term benefits. And this is what talks about karma yoga. This is what we call karma yoga, material, selfless, detached action. And this is at the level of the soul, and the results are eternal. So again, in this material universe, the results, everything's temporary. You know, you fall from one position, you get another, you acquire some different karmic credits, whether good or bad, and then you get another position. Everything's temporary, but in the spiritual world, everything's eternal. So in this next section, 40 through 47, karma kanda, yeah, it's Karma space Kanda. That's karma kanda. Somebody just asked how to spell it. Linda just asked how to spell it. Yeah. So that's what in this next section, 40 through 47, Krishna is going to be comparing karma kanda, this transactional kind of relationship with God that's short-sighted. It's only in the vantage point of this material universe, to karma yoga, which is this broader vision and this consciousness that's focused on obtaining the spiritual world, and therefore having more of a loving relationship with God, one that is selfless. And then in the next section after that, he'll talk more about karma yoga. So why are we talking about yoga here? Actually, the original name of every chapter in the Bhagavad Gita has the word yoga in it. Yoga means linking or connecting or like harmonizing. We know, we talked a lot about how the premise of the Gita is Arjuna asking Krishna questions about dharma, which is like the right thing to do. But in order to know the right thing to do, we need to know the right way to link with reality, or at least as big a picture of reality that we're able to assimilate. You know, it's kind of like if we're driving on roads, it's important to understand what the roads are meant for and what we are meant to do on the road in order to really be able to navigate properly. So that's what we're doing here with this yoga. Why am I here? What is my purpose? And then aligning the rest of my life with that. And yoga means to link. The Gita links our circumstantial concerns about the right thing to do, which is what we call dharma, with our life's transcendental purpose. And in that way, it becomes easier. Once we can see that North Star, it becomes easier to align the journey to get there. And that's what we're doing here. This is what the Gita teaches us. So we'll move on to 40. If anybody wants to share anything or reflections, or please just shout out or raise your hand, or if not, I'll just keep going. So if we look at 240, it says, in this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. This is a really cool verse, because what it's saying here is that if we practice karma yoga, there's no loss, there's no destruction, and a little bit of effort can yield great results. And we know in the material world, wealth does not work like this. Wealth, it can be diminished, it can be destroyed at the blink of an eye, right? Like the stock market can crash and everything's gone, or you pass and you don't get to take your material assets with you, right? It's very temporary. But the spiritual asset is perennial. It comes back every birth. It never goes away. So if we have actions that we do that either benefit the body or the soul, if it's beneficial to the body, it's perishable with the body, right? Anything we invest in this sack of flesh and bone and muscle, it's going to go away. It's very short term. It's this transitional relationship. We've compared the body to a vehicle, a dress, a house. All of these things are temporary, and they're destructible. They're gonna demise. I mean, that's just the nature of matter. But the soul is dormant. The soul is eternal, and it's dormant. It isn't aware of its spirituality. So that's what our job is in this life, is to wake the soul up to its spirituality, wake itself up to its spiritual orientation, its interest in spirituality, its attraction. That's our work in this life. And what this verse is saying is that any work that we invest in the soul in this life to wake up the soul, to uncover the dormant soul, it never goes away. Right? So if like our soul is like 0%, it's completely covered, it's completely dormant, and we uncover it about 25% in this life. And our next life, when we come back, we get to start right there. It's been uncovered 25%. It's evolved and it stays there. And so therefore, that's where we get to start in our next life. Whereas with, again, material riches, you become a millionaire, guess what? You're coming right back in your next life with nothing to your name. Anything that you invest in this body, it's going to be gone. So again, it's just having this broader vision and seeing life as eternal, and the journey of the spiritual evolution, and not just ending at this one life, right? It's just a comma. It's not a period. It's just a transition. And if we can really absorb, if we can really realize that, we could see that investing in the soul is really where the biggest payoff is in this life. It's really the best thing that we can do for ourselves. And as a byproduct, if we invest in the soul, automatically everything else becomes better in this life, right? Our consciousness is lifted, our relationships are better, we're able to show up more loving, more detached, more selfless, right? And that starts to transform our entire life. So there's really no way to lose. You're like watering the roots of the tree so that the branches grow, instead of like focusing on each branch. So the better you are in this life, the better your next life will be, Denny says. So if we're talking about karma kanda and we're in this material universe, yes, we're acquiring karmic credits, kind of like tickets, like at an arcade, you acquire them. There, you have like a stockpile of good karmic things, and you have a stockpile of bad karma for bad things that you've done, or when you've wronged somebody, or you've done something in a low consciousness. We all know it's going to come right back at you. So we acquire these things, and then from that, yes, you go up and down in this material universe. But that's what we're saying here, is that we can get out of that system. We can get out of that entire arcade, with these arcade tickets that we've got of karmic positive karmic and negative karmic. We can get completely out of that, and we can get in a whole different realm if we just detach and surrender to God. If we can dedicate the fruits of our labor to divinity. And we're going to talk more about how to do that, what that actually looks like and what that actually means. But that is what the Gita is saying here. So material gains are temporary, spiritual gains are eternal. When we talk about spiritual growth, again, it's interest, inclination, attraction, conviction. As we start to increase all of these things, we're growing spiritually, right? As we become more attracted, as we just wake up and we naturally want to come on to this meeting and learn about these spiritual truths. We want to sit in meditation. We want to hang out with like-minded people. As our attraction increases, we're growing spiritually, right? As our conviction increases, as we really start to realize some of these principles and practice them, we're growing spiritually. As our interest, as our inclination, as we see that it's what we end up using more of our time for throughout the day. Instead of coming home and watching that couple hours of television, we go to a kirtan and we sing uplifting spiritual music with like-minded people. All of these things, as we're doing them in our lives, we're increasing, our spiritual growth is increasing. And from that, again, wherever you end, wherever you stop, you're going to get right back when you come back in your next life, in your next body. So you can't lose. You're at a great place in investing, making that investment. That is a long-term investment, and that will have the biggest reward, the biggest payoff. That's really what this comes down to, and what the Gita is teaching us here. So the greatest danger is to lose our facility for spiritual growth. And this is where, Denny, you're saying, if we do good things, does that mean we go to higher places? Yes. But if we do bad things, we lose our facility for spiritual growth, which is this human body, right? And we could come back as an animal. And when I say bad things, I don't really mean to say things are good and things are bad, but I mean things that are not bringing us closer to divinity, things that are not connecting us with source, acting selfishly, right? These things can bring us down to a lower species, which is like an animal body. And the problem with an animal body is they don't have the capacity to realize the purpose of life. And that's a real disadvantage. So that's why we try to stay away from things that will be too enticing to our senses or pull us too far in that direction, because it naturally makes us very selfish, like an alcoholic, like an addict who can only think of that. And they're just so driven by that. These are bad pious credits. And if you're so addicted again to just sense gratification, you'll get a body, like we've talked about before, that is conducive to fulfill that desire for you. And if you get too into it and not into connecting with source, then you'll just naturally lose that capacity to even be able to do it. Right? It's like if I was a weightlifter and I stopped working out my arms, pretty soon I'm not going to have any muscles to be able to lift what I used to be able to lift. Right? So we have to use these muscles. We have to use these spiritual muscles. We have to pursue spiritual interests, spiritual topics, so that we can evolve our consciousness. And if we don't, we will lose it. And we could lose the capacity for even the facility for even spiritual growth, which is losing this body. The good news is that spiritual credits guarantee a human body, even if karmic credits are lacking. So if you're trying, if you're studying these texts, if you're, associating with like-minded spiritualists, if you're going to the kirtans, if you're really trying, but maybe you're still messing up in life and you're getting some bad karma, if you're being a little bit selfish, if you have some attachments that you just can't rid yourself of yet, that's okay. Because if as long as you're committed to the process and you're building these spiritual credits, you'll be guaranteed a human body, even in the next life, even if you've messed up quite a bit. So for those of us that have messed up quite a bit and probably have a pretty good stockpile of negative karma, stick to the process and you'll make progress, and it might just take a little bit more time for your attachment to source to diminish the negative attractions that you have in life, or maybe you have some really strong attachments that you just haven't been able to let go of yet. That's okay. Just stick to the process. And as the water, as the spiritual water fills up that cup, the dirty water will naturally come out, and it might just take a little bit more time, but you'll still come back with a human body and a good facility to do this, even if it takes a little bit more time. Does that make sense, Denny? Okay, so let's move on to 241. 241 says, those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. So this is a fun verse. This is a fun verse because this is really comparing karma kanda, the transactional relationship with God, with the limited vantage scope of just this material universe, right? And karma yoga. It's saying that karma yoga is one purpose. It's the object of love is divinity. That's it. That's the purpose. Its destination is divinity. It's how, and in this practice, in this bhakti path of Krishna consciousness, we get to learn how Krishna is lovable, how Krishna loves us, how we can love Krishna. There's endless discovery, but it's just one path. It's this one destination that we're focused on. Karma kanda has many purposes. There's multiple material desires. The happiness is countless. It's an endless cycle. There's many branches, because we all know in this material existence, there's so many ways that we seek, so many refuges that we seek to satisfy our material desires. And it's this age of distraction, right? People are endlessly distracted. The media, social media, you turn it on and it's like, you just scroll, like one thing after another. It's like, oh, that looks enticing. That looks like it would make me happy. That looks like it would make me feel better about myself. It's endless. And therefore the intelligence is contaminated. It's caught in the belief that these things will give me happiness. And we all know that these things will give us some amount of happiness, but this happiness is temporary. And if we get too determined in that happiness, it can eventually cause our demise. Something like an addictive behavior, very easily causes your demise. Even getting so caught up in the way that you look, you can get so caught up in your ego and you turn into just kind of a jerk. Right? So these are the things we kind of have to watch out for. And again, in this, there's this nice quote from Prabhupada in this purport. He says, as by watering the root of a tree, one automatically distributes water to the leaves and branches, so by acting in Krishna consciousness, one can render the highest service to everyone, namely self, family, society, country, humanity, etc. If Krishna is satisfied by one's actions, then everyone will be satisfied. So that's what we're talking about. If we're watering the root of the tree, working just to make Krishna happy, everything else, the rest of the branches will be nourished. We don't have to nourish all of those branches. It's just a byproduct if we water the source. And so that's what we're doing here with this karma yoga. We're watering the source. We're watering the roots of the tree so that it can grow and be beautiful and flourish. And this is just the most direct way, and also the way that will get us the most enduring happiness, fulfilling happiness. If we recognize that I'm actually a spiritual being, then we know that happiness comes from spiritual growth. That's the realization we're working on here. So one kind of a practical life lesson I wanted to hone in on this point here is the importance of determination on a spiritual path, or really any endeavor. right? This verse says, those who are on this path are resolute in purpose. Oh, Trevor joined us. Trevor, it's so wonderful to see you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, so good to see you.
Good to see you.
So resolute in purpose. So let's talk about what determination actually is, right? Determination is born from purified and focused intention, right? So when we talk about purified, we mean void of contamination, void of like distractions, right? So we're multifaceted creatures. And oftentimes when we're doing something, we have multiple motivations. It's not just like we're doing something for one reason. So what we can do is evaluate all of those and try to get as clear as possible as to what our intentions are and why, right? Because the danger here is that if we think our intention is one thing, but really the biggest intention is another thing, we can actually get pulled away by that other intention. So we really have to purify our determination in this. It's like, I wanted to be an engineer because my parents wanted me to be, but I also had personal reasons to be. But if my biggest reason is that my parents wanted me to be, then this desire to please people could pull me around in so many different directions that really are not in alignment at all with my higher goal or my higher objective. So we have to be super careful of that and super honest with ourselves, as honest as we can be. And sometimes we don't even really know until, we're confronted with some kind of situation and we're like, oh, wow, I really didn't know that was my actual motivation. Right? But the same thing is true in our spiritual life. We've really got to keep the main thing the main thing. It's okay to have multiple desires. This will happen. But we really need to try to constantly assess what our desires are, where we are, and challenge ourselves in that. Right. And the other good news is we don't have to be all on our own in this. Spiritual practices help us do this. So if we implement some spiritual practices in our life with whatever determination we have at the time, they will purify us and give us the natural intelligence necessary to proceed. Because what happens is we'll get attached to a higher purpose just naturally from engaging in these spiritual practices, because this is the process. And therefore, the other motivations that we had, maybe we came to this because we wanted to, actually, I could tell you when I first started coming into spiritual life, I was really motivated by the approval of my friends. My friends were really into it. I wanted them to like me. So I was really motivated by that, such that like if they were taken out of the equation, I probably would have been much less motivated, to be honest. But then over time, as I started to really absorb and learn these things myself and develop my own relationship, it became stronger and stronger, such that I was less dependent on what my friends thought, and therefore my determination was getting purified. So I started developing more of kind of my own relationship, and in that, a stronger motivation and a higher purpose. And I started to feel more connected spiritually. And these other things that are relied on, to fulfill my heart were able to subside a little bit, because I was getting so much more fulfillment from my connection with source that I was getting from these practices. And so this is what happens, even if you're unsure about your desires and you're like, okay, well, I know I'm not totally pure. I'm not totally selfless in my desire to do this thing. Know that the practice will purify you. And we want to try our best to be as sincere as possible and as honest with ourselves as possible. But at the same time, know that as you progress forward, you will become purified. And this was my experience. And this actually, happened to me as I was practicing. I had some things with friends where they really didn't approve of me so much. And, just our differences in the way that we viewed reality. And in that, I was like, actually, you know what? I'm really okay with that. This doesn't really tear me down so much like it probably would have, because I feel more grounded now because of this practice and what I've been doing. So it's this constant practice of doing the work and self-evaluating as to where we are in it, and trying to be as sincere as possible, and also trusting in the process and being okay with, where we are, just doing the best we can. What do you guys think of that? Trevor, you want to share something about that?
I think that was beautifully said. It's very true. If we focus on certain things as our primary goal, we might upset ourselves for not being where we're not yet. Fill our plate with too much, it kind of sets ourselves up for disappointment. But whenever we're just enjoying the process, things just naturally happen. Like detachment just kind of happens as a byproduct. Purification happens as a byproduct. So, like you said, I couldn't say it any better than you did. Like, uh, just enjoying where you're at, and uh, not beating yourself up about anything not anything you're not able to do yet. Just giving yourself room to grow and to make mistakes is the biggest tip that I know of. And just falling in love with the process. It's the
I love that. Falling in love with the process wherever you are in it, you know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Angela, do you want to share something with us?
Yes. Thank you for saying that. It really spoke to me because this morning I was practicing, what Vedaji taught us, what is right, and also combining the Kirtak algorithm practice that I'm not sure if you are on that group, but like every morning we receive meditations for Kartik. And I was writing down and I was thinking that yes, that my intentions are not always pure, like completely selfless. But then as I was writing, it suddenly came to me. I was like, well, maybe it doesn't matter. Like maybe at this point it doesn't matter. Maybe I can just continue doing it, and somehow this is going to work out. So this is what you just said really, really spoke to me because it solidifies that thought, like that emotion of, okay, I'm just gonna continue doing my practice and just not thinking of what is going to, like, first the intention and where it's going to take me, just doing it, just regularly. So thank you for saying that. It really, it kind of gives me hope.
Mm. Yeah. And, we can even see our own progress in like our conviction and our growth when we see how our detachment has built over time. Like, for example, when I first started spiritual life, my dad was not supportive. He was like, you're wasting your life. He's a different religion and he's very focused on that religion. So when I started doing this, he's like, no, this is not at all what you should be doing. And it like really kind of broke me. And as I've gone on in my spiritual life, I've seen that like when I haven't, maybe I have had a certain motivation to like please a person, or, I've been doing a certain service to please a teacher or something. And if I feel like I can't please them, I feel completely disheartened in the service. And I almost just like want to give up, But as I go on, I start to even get more conviction myself, and I'm more okay with that. I'm more okay with, okay, maybe I'm not going to make that person happy. Maybe that person's not going to feel this certain way about me. And I'm really just like, I could deal with that so much better because I see that I'm getting more conviction and more relationship here, that I'm less reliant on that. So in my own experience, and that's just my own thing with like people pleasing, but I'm sure other people have other attachments that become revealed as you progress. And you can see that by the level of detachment that you observe as you're progressing on your own spiritual path. And that's actually very empowering. I mean, it's like, oh, it's really nice because I still love this person, but I'm actually okay with not having their approval. It's like, oh, that's actually kind of liberating, right? That was my experience. So that's this practice. The other thing, though, that we have to be careful of is if we're getting really one-pointed, we're getting really focused, we're getting really determined on this overarching life purpose, it's important that we don't become obsessive to the point of reducing the entire world to that thing, right? Thereby not being able to relate to people who aren't interested in it. right? It's in this we can become alienating or come off as fanatical or obsessed. I remember I was a member of a church when I was in high school, and I had a boyfriend who was not a member of that church. And the youth group was like, kind of like, didn't really want me to bring him with me. He wasn't a bad person at all. He was actually like a pretty good person, but he just wasn't really into spiritual life. And I remember being so turned off by that. Like, how is this group so all inclusive? Like, not being inclusive. Like, what's even the point of all of this if I'm not feeling? And I know a lot of us have had that kind of like religious trauma. So it's something we want to be really careful for, you know, this worldview, expanding our worldview should make us more relatable. You know, we really need to have this inclusive understanding of divinity or Krishna. It's not world denying devotion to him. It doesn't have to be world rejecting. You know, it's the whole. Krishna's the whole. He's all living beings are his parts. He's the source of all attractiveness, of all attractive things. Krishna's the source, right? He's a benefactor of all living beings, right? When we can appreciate this pervasiveness, we can actually celebrate others' abilities as his gifts and their work as a potential way of worshiping him, right? It should broaden our perspective. It should make us more loving, more kind, more accepting, because we see Krishna everywhere, right? Not just in our practices, not just in our sadhana. We start to develop this vision where we see Krishna everywhere and we can relate in that way. And if we can see Krishna in ordinary things, we can value people where they are and connect their interests with Krishna. And that's how we want to be, right? We don't want to be exclusive. We don't want to be fanatical. We can keep our minds on Krishna. We can learn to care for others spiritually in terms that they appreciate, because what we're doing here is broadening our vision. That's what we're doing. And that should be the byproduct if we're doing it right. We can learn to care for others spiritually in terms they appreciate, thereby attracting them towards us and Krishna, which is the ultimate goal. So that can be kind of the other side of the coin of getting just so focused in your one pointed, you know, we have to understand that what we're focused on, this is all pervasive and it's everywhere. And it's not just in that very same, you know, track that we're on. It's everywhere, and we can relate everything to it. So I thought that was very beautiful. Should we move on? Does anybody want to share anything here? Maybe we'll do one more then for the day. So text 42, 43, they're together. And they say men of small knowledge are very much attracted or attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to higher planets, or to heavenly planets, resultant good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say that there is nothing more than this. So here again, the Vedic cosmos is multi-layer, multi-level. Let's just try to remember this kind of like vision, this visualization in your head, because this is important. Because we have earth, we have hell, we have heaven. That's in material universe. That's all material. It's all temporary. Above that, we have the spiritual world. The Karma Kanda section of the Vedas helps people get pleasure on earth and in heaven. It's just limited to this material universe, just up and down, based off of these karmic credits they're accruing, like these arcade tickets that they get to cash in, and then they get to go to a higher place. That's Karma Kanda. And that's what the word flowery words is referring to here. It's a phrase of something that's non-enduring, that's temporary. So even heavenly planets are not eternal. Heaven is temporary, right? Heaven is just a place where people enjoy more opulently than we do here. You know, but it's the same kind of concept. It's still sense gratification, but it's just more opulent. The spiritual world is eternal. So it's saying allurement for another temporary house is unwise. At the beginning, we talked about a rented house, and then you get a bigger, more opulent rented house. It's saying skip that step. It's unwise. Why move to a bigger, more opulent temporary house? What we really want is an owned house. So the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas, it's a section of the Vedas, but it isn't the whole Vedas. And this is what the Vedas are. You know, they meet people where they're at, so that eventually they can bring everyone to spiritual life, everyone to religious life, by meeting people where they're at and giving them a way to connect with God, to get what they desire, whatever that desire is. And everybody has different desires. So, but sometimes the good can be the enemy of the best, right? And that's what happens with these heavenly planets. The opulences are so good that it's like, you don't have any desire to go any higher, because it's just the opulences are so wonderful. Right? So karma kanda helps people with material growth. And again, in this material universe, while karma yoga helps with spiritual growth. That's where we're trying to get. Those who think they are pursuing the best when they are missing the best are misled. And that's the Vedas are. It's a multi-level program here. It can fit anybody wherever they are. Right? The bottom is instant material pleasure, like this instant sense gratification that we've all kind of been culturally trained to pursue. Right? The Vedas will give you prescriptions for that. Here, you can obtain these. Here's a way to connect with God and obtain these pleasures. The next one is long-term material pleasures in this world. Way to connect with God and get these long-term material pleasures. The next is long-term material pleasures in the next world. Right? That's where Krishna said, Arjuna, even if you fight and you die, you'll get to go to heavenly planets. It's all good. Right? The next, and this is where we're arriving, and we're going to talk more and more about, is this karma yoga, the next long-term spiritual pleasure, the highest. And Krishna's just saying, skip these intermediate levels. You're just going to get caught in the cycle of birth and death and just prolong your time here. Just come all the way up to the spiritual world. And that's what we're talking about here. So Trevor, do you want to share something?
Yeah, forgive me if I sound off or I'm running a little rough today. I had toothache all night, so didn't get much sleep. My whole left side of my face is in so much pain that I'm nauseous.
Oh no.
But yeah, that reminded me of what Prabhupada said. What he said was on point, as always. And he would say that both the lower planetary systems, or the hellish planets, and the higher planetary systems, the heavenly planets, or the demigod realm, are both overwhelming. The hellish planets are overwhelming with suffering and pain, and the higher planetary systems are overwhelming with material luxuries. The trick of waking up is realizing that you're in a prison altogether if you're in the material situation. So why would you want a better prison cell whenever you can get out of the prison altogether? Because the thing is, we don't remember how many times we've been to hell. We don't remember how many times we've been in a demigod body, because the evolutionary process a lot of the time starts over whenever you come back to the third dimension. That's why the demigods really adore the humans so much, because the human body is such a gift. You're not guaranteed to have it. It's the best piece of technology on the planet is for advancing and getting out of the prison.
So nicely said. Yeah, exactly. That's why the ideal birth is here in this age where we get so much mercy, and in this body on this planet, because exactly that. If we're too high, we get attached to these material opulences. We think that that's the highest, right? We confuse good with the best. And if we're too low, that's also not good. So we all have this opportunity here right now, this planet, this body, this age. Let's do this. Right? Let's pursue this spiritual knowledge together, the spiritual practices, and let's make the best use of a bad bargain, which is a Prabhupada thing. So does anybody else want to share anything?
Yeah, I was just thinking, can you hear me okay? I have my headphones in.
Yeah.
I haven't. It's always so nice to be part of this group. And I was thinking the same thing about how even when we go to the heavenly planets, yeah, they're too good. It's like we're too good to where we forget Krishna. And really, the ultimate suffering is our forgetfulness of our spiritual nature and our relationship with Krishna. And also to the point of the process, staying with the process, even though our intentions aren't exactly purified yet, and looking at them and realizing, okay, maybe I don't have the highest intention yet. To me, that's what like japa is so good for. Like, it's good for so many things, but for me, when I'm doing my japa, I realize like, oh wow, like I don't always have the highest intention. But because I've followed so many spiritual teachers who talk about, when we're chanting japa, we should be praying, how can I have more pure service? How can I, purify this heart? So when I'm chanting my japa, I'm always trying to pray for that, like purify my heart, purify my intention. How can I serve you with unalloyed love? How can I get to that highest love? And japa is really like that calling out for that. And that's part of the process. And even when we're doing kirtan or when we're reading, it's like putting ourselves in that process to where it cleanses us of those ulterior intentions, to where our true self, because our true self as spirit soul already has that intention. It already has that relationship, That's another like really awesome concept, is like we already are a pure soul. We're just covered. So it's not about like becoming our pure self. It's about cleansing away so the pure self can come back through. And that's really what these processes do. It's utilizing this material body to focus the senses and the intentions towards the highest goal, so that eventually the material washes away. And yeah, I love that concept. That's really like trying to get to the concept of thinking, I'm a soul with a body rather than I'm a body with a soul. And so yeah, those are just my reflections after today's class. Thank you.
Those are beautiful. Thank you for all of those. So nicely said. Does anybody else want to share anything? Okay. Well, thank you all for coming and walking this journey together. And this Sangha holds me up, it inspires me. So thank you all. And I'll see you on Thursday. Aw.
Haribol.
Oh, so good to see you. Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.